If you have ever been interested in shadow work but had these trepidations, these worries, these wonder about whether or not it's going to be dangerous, whether or not it is going to be miserable, today's episode is for you. So shadow work, I believe, has a major PR problem, and it is one of my greatest career goals to help revive its image. And so in this episode today, we are going to talk about how to approach shadow work in a more creative way, in a more playful way, because ultimately fun is fun and fun is done. And if you want to get the most out of your shadow work, it means you have to be the most motivated to actually do it. So hello everybody and welcome back to the Healing for Hot Messes podcast, where magic, mindset, and mystery collide. As some of you guys know, I have written a few books, and one of them is Shadow Work for Hot Messes, Transform from Chaos to Clarity by Embracing Your Authentic Self. And in this book, I attempted the somewhat uphill task of trying to make shadow work more accessible, more fun, more playful, and more simple. And the reason for this is that I think it truly can be all of those things. Now, first, the quick and the dirty on shadow work. So shadow work is this process of uncovering the unconscious information that is running in the background of your life, of your consciousness, your mindset, and your awareness. This is in the background of your very spirit itself that can sometimes be pulling the strings and ruling your life in these very pervasive ways. So there's one particular quote that is the most often used to summarize what it is and why it matters by Jung. So he is the father of shadow work himself. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. This is such a banger quote because it really explains the high level nature and concepts of shadow work in a very quick and condensed way. So the reality is we all have a variety of things, good, bad, and neutral, traits, aspects, desires, inclinations, biases, all of this sort of shit that lies in our shadowy realms. And it can kind of like pop up here and there and kind of shock us, reveal incongruencies in our character, and help us to pull the curtains back on our patterns, our limiting belief, our self-sabotagey bullshit, relationship roles we tend to engage in over and over again. All of these things that are often standing in the way of our next level unleashed life while we kind of remain blissfully unaware. Now, because we humans tend to make everything a lot more miserable and complicated than it needs to be, a lot of the shadow work conversation ends up being about, how difficult it is, how hard it is, how challenging it is. Because really it's about facing your bullshit, right? So your level of shadow work, how impactful it's going to be, how healing it's going to be on your life really is proportional to your willingness to look at yourself with radical honesty, regardless of what you find. Obviously, that's going to be a challenge. Obviously, it's going to be painful, particularly if you have a history of abuse, trauma, that sort of thing. It really can be difficult to access the shadow, to kind of navigate those realms, to do that investigation work. And so in my opinion, shadow work is something that is inherently kind of heavy. So I think it can be part of our responsibility for our own healing and to try and kind of turn the gears to a more playful and fun place, that we bring levity to it, that we bring the creative aspect to it, and that is how we are going to find that place of a lack of self-judgment, which really is what's going to help us to integrate. So when it comes to the shadow work conversation, it has this air of punishment, this air of like that it has to be really challenging in order for it to help you grow. And you know, it kind of brings to mind this like really moody, deep, like miserable vibe that can be really intimidating. And ultimately, I think more people need to be doing their shadow work. So we don't need it to be intimidating. What we need is for it to be accessible. Look, is it hard to face your shit? Absolutely, right? Obviously, it's going to be hard to face, the things in your life that you've been held back by, the things in your life where maybe you were the problem. Like, it's going to be a challenge to face those things. But as a shadow worker and as a person who guides other people in their shadow work, I can't help but see the martyr shadow at play. This quest to feel important, to feel enlightened, to feel like you're actually having to have this level of suffering that ends up being proportional to how much healing you get out of it. And I just don't believe that this is true. We tend to make misery or challenge or hard things sort of a twisted virtue in our society. And then we wonder why we cannot or are not progressing individually and collectively. So like I said before, fun shit is fun, so fun shit gets done. So as a person who has ADHD, as a person who's very chaotic, and as a person who kind of like mines for dopamine in every single section of my life, I can't help but try and simplify, right? Gamify and try and find the fun in everything I can, whether it comes to my spiritual practices, my personal development work, etc. And the reason for this is because when fun shit is fun shit gets done. So I don't know about you guys, but the thought of weeping into my journal on a regular basis makes me just want to say fuck it and not do the inner work whatsoever. When we're at that point, I might as well just throw in the towel, watch another rerun of Trailer Park Boys, and stuff my face with nachos. But that being said, I have a lot of inner work to do, just like everyone else, so it has to be a priority. So how do I make this happen? By letting it be playful, fun, and creative. So this is something that I really want to help other people with as well, which is why I do this in my book. I do it in my seasonal membership, the Feral Self-Care Collective, and in my one-to-one power sessions with people when I do shadow work with people, whether it be for creative coaching or just for up-leveling in their individual lives. Now, unpopular opinion, but I believe that shadow work can be light work. So what if it gets to be fun? What if uprooting all of these shifty, repressed bits of ourselves get to feel like coming home, like falling in love, or like becoming your own playful, theatrical one-man show about, how silly you are, how you're just a flawed human being having a flawed human experience. This is the mindset and approach that I like to take towards it so that I don't get stuck in a hole of digging up all my demons and not knowing what to do with them, or feeling more shame, more guilt, more fear, which ultimately always leads to more repression, which means more shit being stuffed into the shadow. So what if you could do your shadow work with a paintbrush in your hand, with a page full of doodles, and while writing the most unhinged manifestos you possibly could to unleash your inner drama queen and give it a space to speak its mind. Let it come to the light so that you can see these are the things that are really going on in your subconscious and how you really feel, and start to understand and navigate how they're manifesting in your conscious life and the reality that you're actually living. What if you could laugh at yourself? What if you could really let it all hang out, be cringe as fuck, and then step back for a moment and roll your eyes with like some compassion and a little kinky, excited glee? So I think all of this gets to be the case when we stop focusing so much on unleashing some very dark and moody goth aesthetic kind of version of power by like dredging up our shadows, trudging around in the dark, and start treating this work like sifting through the cereal box for the rare and thrilling toy that can be found on the inside. Is anybody else old enough to remember those days? Because you are the prize. You are always the prize. So shadow work, you guys, can be creative, playful, and fun. And I hope that when you listen to this, it is giving you an activation. It's giving you some ideas, some things to orient towards so that you can approach it in such a way. So again, I think a lot of us humans tend to live life unnecessarily on hard mode. Life can be inherently hard, so we do not need to make it harder than it needs to be by seeing those challenging things, those hard things, as some sort of penance or price we have to pay for our growth. So my advice to you and my little kind of drop in the bucket of the shadow work conversation is this: if you actually want to approach your shadow work in a way that is motivating, right? You should actually enjoy it to some degree. Even if you're dredging up hard things, even if you're looking at things that are very difficult to face, bring some levity into the situation, bring some creative flair to this situation, and try and find it to be useful and meaningful instead of being something where it feels like homework and something where you might end up feeling worse about yourself and miserable after, because that's ultimately definitely not what we are trying to do. That is kind of goes anti everything we are trying to achieve with our shadow work. So in order to make that happen, this should be seen as somewhere you could potentially have fun, some whimsy, chaos, some creativity, and where you can really allow yourself to be fully and freely self-expressed. Yes, you may learn that you are the asshole in a lot of ways. Get over it and welcome to the club. After all, that is what it is to be human, right? We are a collective of cheeky, shifty, tricksy, flawed human creatures having a flawed human experience. And that is actually exactly how it is supposed to be. We all need to give ourselves permission to have a very big, deep breath, releasing the need to be perfect and to have it all figured out, and to recognize that the magic is always in the mess. Instead of seeing our flaws and imperfections and our weird, shadowy craziness that we hold inside, our incongruencies, the ways that we are paradoxical, it's time to start recognizing this as potentially one of the most interesting and compelling things about yourself and about us as human beings. So pass it on. Shadow work gets to go way beyond the journal, and it can include things like dancing, movement, painting, yelling at empty chairs, putting on theatrical drama-fueled shows, actually doing difficult, challenging, hard things, even though they feel weird to hold in our body, doing some emotional cosplay, maybe pretending you're someone else, invoking archetypes, creating rituals, conjuring up thought forms, doodling your worst qualities, and frolicking barefoot with your inner child. Just please, for the love, if you are going to do it at all, make sure it is enhancing versus depleting, and that you actually do something with the insights that you find afterwards in order to integrate. Otherwise, it is just circle jerking your demons with a moody twist. Let me know what your thoughts on this are. I would love to have a conversation with you guys about shadow work and about how shadow work gets to be fun, creative, and playful. And if you want to find more information about my seasonal membership, the Feral Self-Care Collective, where we do shit like this, we do guided weekly practices to connect to spiritual self-care and to make the inner work fun, playful, practical, and accessible. You can find that in the description below. You can also find down there a free gift, which is my Feral Self-Care Toolkit, which is a guided meditation and 3 quickie practices that you can download today that take 10 minutes or less so that you can start doing the deeper inner work without having to, make some elaborate 42-step morning routine or throw your entire life into a blender. It gets to be easy, you guys. It does get to be easy. And feel free to share this if you think somebody else could benefit from it, if you think somebody else could join the conversation, and subscribe for more. Thank you so much for being here. Until next time, sending love to my feral friends.